Hello. Thanks for joining me. I want to talk today about Good Friday. Good Friday is a day on our calendar that a lot of people use to remember the death of Jesus Christ. But I think it's fair to ask the question, why do we call it Good Friday? I mean, after all, this is marking Jesus dying on a cross, being nailed to wooden beams, and effectually being tortured. And so we call it Good Friday and we remember it, but why do we do that? And so here's what I want to do. I want you to imagine with me and to think about it in these terms. Think about it in terms of a funeral. When someone passes away, what do? We dress up in order to honor the person who's been deceased. There's usually a eulogy of some sort where someone will talk about that person's life and include anecdotes and say things such as, if she were here today, she'd want you to know this. Or if he was with us, he would want to make sure that you remember this about his life. It gives us a sense of hope. It gives us a sense of carrying on. And Good Friday is very similar because just hours before he died, before he was hanging on a cross and crying out to his God, his Father, Jesus said these words. In the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 6, he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Now, this was an astounding claim, particularly in a culture not unlike ours, where there were thousands upon thousands of ways to express your faith, thousands of ways to relate to God. And Jesus is standing there somewhat defiantly saying, "No, I am the way. I am the definitive and only way to God." And so for many of us, we recognize how that can sometimes cause turmoil within us because we all have our own way. We all like to do things a particular way and in a particular order, and we don't like it when someone says, "No, that's not the right way." And Jesus is essentially saying, listen, the idea that faith is like a mountain, maybe you've heard this before, where you have all these religions, and at the bottom of a mountain, there are these trails. And one trail might be the trail of Judaism or Islam or Hinduism or pacifism or even atheism. But if you just stay true to that trail and you follow it the way that it leads, you will eventually reach the top of existence. It doesn't matter which trail you take because it all ends in the same place. And Jesus says it's not true. That's not true at all. In fact, there's only one way to the, quote, top of the mountain. And that's through me, Jesus Christ. But he doesn't stop there. He actually continues and he says, not only am I the way, but I'm actually the truth as well. And again, we live in a very similar culture where truth is somewhat relative. People define truth according to their own preference, according to their own taste. People define truth according to their tradition, based on how they were brought up and where they lived. And Jesus actually takes a stand and very clearly says there's only one truth, and it is absolute. Well, that's not something that we necessarily like to think about as well. But just hours after declaring that, Jesus again was on a cross and he died. And history says that not only did he die, he rose again. Now, I bring that up for this reason, is because there are competing claims to truths, but they all cannot be actually accurate. Think about it from this perspective. Christianity says that Jesus died. Islam actually says he doesn't die, that something else happened to him on the cross and he was taken away. Well, both can't be true. One is either true and one isn't. Either Jesus died or he did not die. Again, hours after declaring that, he did die. And I say that because it's a matter of historical fact. It's a objective thing. Historians outside of the Bible recorded the fact that there was a man named Jesus of Nazareth who walked the earth, who called himself the Messiah, who preached a gospel called the Good News, and that he was crucified by the Roman government, and that he was placed in a tomb, and then 3 days later, that tomb was empty. And then days and days after that, there were literally hundreds upon hundreds of people who witnessed a physical Jesus walking around. They saw a resurrected Jesus. Now, this isn't taste. This isn't preference. This isn't tradition. This is truth. And Jesus says that my truth, the truth, is the fact that you and I are separated from him because of our sin, because of our rebellion against the Creator. And the only way to bridge that gap, the only way for us to be reconciled and to be restored into a relationship with God is if we accept first that truth about ourselves, and then if we also extend that truth claim to Jesus, that his life and his death and ultimately his resurrection is the only way to God. And so Jesus, though, takes it to another level. He doesn't just say, I'm the way. He doesn't just say, I'm the truth. But then he says he is the life. Now, most of history, in fact, all of history records that any leader, any sort of teacher, any sort of religious guru or holy man has a story, but that their story ends when they die. I mean, think about it. Muhammad died when he was 62. Confucius when he was 82. Buddha when he was in his 80s. Moses even when he was 120. But in a very real sense, at the death of Jesus, his story began. You see, Jesus rose from the dead. Jesus said that he was the life, and so everything about him, in fact, all of his ministry was him talking about how to have life in him because he knew he would conquer death. He knew that his funeral would be short-lived. And so even throughout his ministry, we see him talking about life all the time. There's a story where he was meeting a woman at the well. And this woman who had a fairly checkered history of many husbands and had a reputation, no doubt, is getting water at a well. And Jesus says to her, if you keep drinking this water, you'll keep getting thirsty. But if you drink the water that I offer, living water, then it will spring up within you and you will never thirst again. There will be a well of eternal life that you have access to. He says to a crowd in the Gospels that he is the bread of life, meaning that you will never hunger again. You will never have a hole in your soul again that is empty and needs filling over and over and over if you just simply trust me. He says to a group of people who are struggling with the evil and the darkness in the world that I am the light of the world. If you follow me, if you trust me, you will never have to walk in darkness again, but you will live by the light of life. Really, what Jesus was saying is that in order to have life, it's found in a relationship with God. That's why he finishes his statement, I am the way, the truth, and the life, with saying this: no one comes to the Father except through me. Now, some of us might hear that and think, well, wait a minute. Why is there just one way? Why is Jesus saying, I am the way? How come there aren't multiple ways to get to God? If God is loving, if God is the creator, couldn't he be more creative? Couldn't he be more loving to offer us multiple ways so that more people could find him? And I think we need to think about that as well. And let me use an example. Have you ever been in a conversation with a friend? And maybe that conversation's been going on for quite a while, maybe an hour, 2 hours or so. And in the midst of that conversation, another friend walks in and hears something that you say and begins commenting and talking about something that you and your first friend had already talked about maybe hours ago. And I think this is kind of what we're talking about here. When Jesus makes this statement, I am the way, the truth, and the life, we're entering into a conversation that's been going on for a very, very long time. And so let me talk about that for just a little bit. This is a conversation that started at the beginning of time when God created the world. He created everything that we see. He was a beautiful artist in creating mountains and trees and oceans and seas. But at the culmination of that creation, he decided to breathe life into a man and into a woman. And he said, you can have an abundance of life. You can have a full life with me if we just maintain our relationship. If we don't betray each other, if you trust me and do what I say, we can have a beautiful life together. But they rebelled. They chose their own way. They chose their own truth. They chose to live their own life. And they walked away from God. And yet, after that happened, God comes back. And he says, okay, well, we can still have that relationship. We can still maintain that intimacy. But the way I'm going to do it now is I'm going to allow you to multiply, and I'm going to create a group of people. And this small group of people will witness to the rest of the world. Witness to the world like my way and my truth and my life, so that all might be available in order to have a relationship with me. But over time, that small group of people called the nation of Israel began to rebel as well, began to find their own way, and began to find their own truths, and began to live their life the way they wanted to. So God sent messengers. He sent messengers to people to point them back towards his way, back towards his truth, back towards the life that he wanted to share with them. But people rebelled still. They stoned these messengers. They would lock them up. They would throw them in lions' den. They would do all sorts of things in order to continue to rebel against the Creator. And after centuries and centuries of doing this, the Creator finally says, okay, I'll just show up myself. And so he does. In the flesh, shows up to the world. And he begins to talk about his way. And he begins to proclaim his truth. And he begins to invite people to experience life with him. And yet the creation, once again, rebelled against the Creator. And still today, God reaches out to us. And God, in his grace and in his mercy, says to us, if you will just simply follow me, if you will deny your way and your truth and your life and recognize that my way and my truth and my life is the only way that you will truly be fulfilled, and the only way that you really will have an abundance of life, free from all the shackles of the world that we live in. If you will do that, then our relationship can be restored. And so I think the question is not so much, why is there only one way? The question is, why is there a way at all? Given our history, given everything that we've done, why is it that God continues to pursue and offer us a way to have a relationship with him? It's because he loves you. It's because he was so glad to die for you in order to bring you to him that he had no other choice. Out of his love, out of his joy, out of his desire to be in relationship with you, there was no other way. And so we as believers today recognize that. And if you're watching me somehow today and you're not necessarily someone who follows Jesus Christ, I hope you understand that's the message of Good Friday. That's the reason why when we show up at funerals, we can declare a celebration. It's because there's a hope from that person's life. There is an extension of that person's life, whether it's carried on in memories, whether it's carried on the effects that it has on people. That person impacted his family, her friends, and those around them. Jesus is different, though, because it's not just simply a memory that he leaves for us. He actually is still present among us through his Holy Spirit. Because the good of the Good Friday is that it wouldn't last forever, is that his death would be overcome by his resurrection. And so that's why Friday is good. That's why we celebrate it today. And I hope you're encouraged by that. And I hope that if you have any questions whatsoever, that you would somehow reach out to us, or you would reach out to another friend who is a Christian and ask them questions. We here at Bethany Christian Center want to be available for you as well. And so if you're watching this through our Facebook page or through our YouTube channel, recognize that you can jump onto our website, find our contact information, and reach out to us. Because just as you're reaching out towards understanding the way, the truth, and the life, Christ has done that as well and continues to do that. Thanks a lot.